There's a question that seems innocent, but has brought down more men than any explicit mistake. And the most curious thing? It's not about what you do, it's about what you say. Because, unlike what you've been taught, it's not absolute sincerity that builds respect, it's the awareness of what should remain silent. Most men believe that opening up completely, exposing everything, telling everything, is the way to create connection. But in practice, this only reveals a lack of strategy. And as Machiavelli said, those who play the game of life based on ideals lose to those who understand reality. The problem is that nobody teaches you this. On the contrary, they teach you that the more you open up, the more she will trust you. That the more you demonstrate neediness, the more she will value you. That the more you explain your past, your plans, your fears, the closer you will be. But the reality is different. And often, it is precisely in this excess of exposure that you lose control of the situation. Because, without realizing it, you give away what you shouldn't and transform your own narrative into something that can be questioned, reinterpreted, or even used against you. And this is where the game changes, because there are secrets that aren't about hiding, they're about protecting. They are decisions based on real human nature, not on comfortable illusions. They are silent choices that maintain respect, mystery, and balance in the relationship. Throughout this video, you will understand exactly what these points are, and why, in certain situations, silence is not weakness, it's power. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos. It's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now. Not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder. You are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. There's a modern illusion being sold as absolute virtue, the idea that total transparency is synonymous with deep connection. It sounds beautiful, almost noble, but in practice, it functions as a silent strategic error. A man who reveals everything all the time, without filter, without timing, without reading the environment, ends up giving up what Machiavelli would call the appearance of virtue. That subtle ability to show enough to inspire confidence, but not enough to lose control of the narrative. Naked truth thrown out without strategy doesn't build power, it dissolves it. Because in the real game of human relationships, it's not just about what is said, but when, how, and why it is said. And this is where an essential principle comes in: politics guided by reality, not by ideals. Observe carefully. When someone reveals everything about themselves right from the start, thoughts, insecurities, stories, intentions, what's left to be discovered? The mystery, one of the invisible pillars of attraction, simply disappears. And without mystery, there's no tension. Without tension, there's no curiosity. And without curiosity, interest begins to die silently. A simple example: imagine a man who, on the second date, already tells his entire emotional history, his traumas, his plans, and even his deepest doubts. At the moment, it might seem like authenticity, but in her perception, that could translate as excess, as a lack of filter, or worse, as someone who doesn't know their own game. And here comes another classic principle: decisions based on real human nature, not romantic idealism. This doesn't mean being cold, manipulative, or distant. On the contrary, It means understanding that value also lies in what is preserved. A strategic man knows that silence is not absence. It's controlled presence. He doesn't lie, but he also doesn't give himself away indiscriminately. He understands that just like in any power game, whether in business, politics, or personal life, there's the concept of the calculated use of force, which here translates to the calculated use of information. Not everything needs to be said. Not everything needs to be now. And often what isn't revealed at the beginning creates the necessary space for something much deeper to develop later. Because when someone feels there are still layers to be discovered, the interest remains alive. And this, without realizing it, already prepares the ground for a delicate question that almost every man faces at some point. There's a specific moment in almost every relationship when a seemingly innocent question arises, but one laden with profound implications. She looks at him with curiosity disguised as lightness and asks about the past. How many people? What stories? What experiences? And it's precisely at this point that many men, believing they are being honest and transparent, make a strategic mistake. Because this isn't about lying, it's about understanding that not all truth needs to be exposed in its raw form. A man who understands the principles of Machiavelli knows that the appearance of virtue is often worth more than the complete exposure of reality. And this isn't manipulation. It's reading the context, it's social intelligence, it's constant adaptability. Think clearly. When he reveals numbers, details, or intimate stories from the past, he's not just sharing information, he's creating mental images in her head. And these images rarely work in his favor. Even if she doesn't show it, silent comparisons begin to emerge. Insecurities can be triggered, and her perception of him can subtly yet irreversibly change. A practical example. Imagine two scenarios. In the first, he answers directly, giving numbers and details. In the second, he answers lightly, deflecting with humor or elegance, something like enough to learn, and just enough to know what really matters today. In the second case, he maintains control, preserves the mystery, and avoids opening unnecessary doors. This is a decision based on real human nature, not on an ideal of absolute transparency. And here's an even deeper point. When a man talks too much about the past, he unknowingly anchors his identity in what has already happened, and not in who he has become. And in the game of attraction, that's dangerous, because what really matters isn't who he was, but what he represents now. Strategic silence in this case acts as an invisible shield. He doesn't deny, he doesn't lie, but he also doesn't feed narratives that don't add value to the present. It's the same principle as avoiding being hated. It's not about pleasing, but about not creating unnecessary conflicts. And curiously, because this ability to know what not to say becomes even more critical when the subject ceases to be the past and becomes the future, especially when it involves ambition. There's a silent mistake many men make when they start building something big. They talk too much, too soon. Driven by enthusiasm, validation, or even naivete, they end up sharing their plans, goals, and visions before they even have the structure to support them. And here's a truth few accept. Plans exposed prematurely lose strength, not because they're bad, but because they're still fragile. A man who understands the principles of Machiavelli knows that virtù and fortuna go hand in hand, skill and opportunity, and that both require discretion. Because in the real world, not all support is genuine, and not all doubt is innocent. Observe what happens in practice. He shares an idea, starting a business, changing careers, beginning a project, and instead of pure encouragement, he receives questions laden with uncertainty. Are you sure? What if it doesn't work out? Have you considered the risk? And little by little, what was energy turns into hesitation. Not because he wants to sabotage, but because he is reacting based on his own perception of security. And this is where an essential principle comes in. Decisions based on real human nature, not on idealized expectations. A direct example. Instead of announcing, "I'm going to launch a digital business," he simply starts. He studies, tests, makes mistakes in silence, adjusts, and only shows it when there are already results. When the game changes from idea to reality, perception changes along with it. And this is not luck, it's the calculated use of force applied to information. There is also a powerful psychological effect that few realize. When a man talks about his plans, he receives a small dose of emotional reward, as if he had already accomplished it. And this, ironically, can reduce the urgency to act. The brain is satisfied with the anticipated recognition, and the execution loses intensity. That's why strategic men operate differently. They build in silence. They understand that the end justifies the means in the sense of protecting the process until it is ready to be seen. It's not about hiding out of fear. It's about preserving through intelligence. And curiously, the more he learns to keep his plans secret, the more he realizes that there are other, even more sensitive areas where revealing too much not only weakens the image, but also undermines the perception of security that people have about him. There's a very fine line between intelligent vulnerability and reckless exposure. And when it comes to money, that line becomes even more delicate. Many men trying to create connection end up sharing unresolved financial insecurities, debt, fear of not growing, uncertainties about the future. And while this may seem authentic, in practice it can have the opposite effect. Because in her mind, security isn't just emotional, it's also structural. A man who understands the principles of Niccolo Machiavelli understands that the appearance of virtue here means conveying stability, even while still building. It's not about faking wealth, but about not projecting instability. In practice, what happens is subtle but powerful. He might say something like, "I'm a bit lost financially," or "I don't know if I'll be able to manage." At the moment, it might seem like just a venting of frustration, but for her, it could trigger a silent alarm. It's not judgment, it's instinct, it's human nature operating without asking permission. And that's exactly why decisions need to be guided by reality, not ideals. A direct example, instead of expressing raw insecurity, he might communicate responsibility and action. Something like, "I'm reorganizing some areas of my financial life to grow faster." Do you see the difference? The information is similar, but the perception changes completely. This is the calculated use of force applied to communication. And here's an even more strategic point. Leadership isn't about having everything solved. It's about demonstrating direction. A man might be in the middle of a difficult process, but if he conveys clarity of direction, he maintains authority. Now, when he externalizes unresolved fear, he transfers weight, and little by little, the dynamic changes. And this doesn't mean he should carry everything alone forever. It simply means there's a right time for each level of openness. Because in the real game of relationships, avoiding being hated also involves not generating unnecessary anxiety. And interestingly, when he begins to master this control, he realizes there are even deeper vulnerabilities. Those that, when exposed without strategy, not only generate doubt, but can be used against him at the wrong moment. There is a stark difference between being aware of one's own weaknesses and indiscriminately displaying them. A mature man learns to look inward, to recognize his vulnerabilities, but he doesn't go around handing out this map as if it were proof of authenticity. Because, in the heat of conflict, what was said in confidence can be reinterpreted, distorted, and in some cases used as ammunition, not out of pure malice, but because human nature reacts under pressure. And whoever understands this, as Niccolo Machiavelli taught, makes decisions based on real human nature, not on idealized expectations of perfect behavior. Think of something simple. He reveals that he's insecure about rejection, or that he's been betrayed, and it deeply affected him. In a peaceful moment, this generates empathy, but in a more intense discussion, a phrase like, "You react like that because you're insecure," might emerge. See? What was vulnerability has become a label, and labels, when repeated, begin to shape perception. A practical example of emotional intelligence here isn't hiding everything, but filtering what is shared and to what extent. Instead of exposing raw weakness, he can work on it internally. Therapy, reading, personal development, and share only what is already under control. Books like Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman or practices like daily journaling can help in this process of internal strengthening without the need for premature exposure. This isn't about shutting down, it's about strategic protection. A man who understands the game doesn't need to constantly prove his vulnerability. He demonstrates evolution, consistency, presence. He understands the principle of calculated use of force, where even information about himself is precisely dosed. Because ultimately, what generates respect isn't how much he reveals, but how much he sustains. And as he masters this, he begins to realize one last point, perhaps the most delicate of all. Because it doesn't involve the past, nor plans, nor weaknesses, it involves something much deeper, how much he allows his own needs to be perceived. There's an almost invisible point where the feeling ceases to be attractive and begins to weigh heavily. When a man demonstrates that he needs her more than he chooses to be with her, the dynamic changes. What was once light, spontaneous and desired begins to carry a sense of responsibility, as if she had to reciprocate, sustain, maintain something that has ceased to be natural. And here comes a difficult truth. Attraction is born from choice, not need. A man who understands the principles of Niccolo Machiavelli understands that being feared rather than loved doesn't mean coldness. It means not placing oneself in a position of total emotional dependence. Because when that happens, the power of decision ceases to be balanced. In practice, this manifests in small behaviors. He cancels everything for her, always responds immediately, completely molds himself to her wishes, and abandons his own routine and goals. At first, this might even seem like dedication, but over time, it starts to sound like a lack of structure. A direct example, a man who maintains his schedule, his projects, his commitments, gym, work, reading, and fits the relationship within that, conveys value. A man who revolves around her conveys dependence, and this isn't judgment, it's perception. That's why strategic men follow the principle of having their own loyal armies. Metaphorically speaking, they build their own lives, their own pillars, before depending on any relationship to feel complete. And here comes the most profound point of all. When someone feels indispensable in the other's life, the tension of conquest disappears. And without that tension, interest begins to diminish, even unconsciously. Therefore, the man who understands the game doesn't repress the feeling. He simply doesn't transform it into an explicit need. He demonstrates presence, but not neediness. He chooses, but doesn't beg. He connects, but doesn't lose himself. This is constant adaptability, knowing how to adjust behavior without betraying one's own essence. And ultimately, when he masters this balance, he realizes that it's not just about relationships, but about how he positions himself in the whole world. Because whoever controls how much they need, controls how much they can be influenced. Now let me ask you a direct question. How many times have you spoken too much thinking you were doing the right thing? How many times have you revealed parts of yourself without realizing it wasn't the right time? The truth is, nobody teaches you how to calibrate this. They teach you to be sincere, but they don't teach you to be strategic. And in the real game, the one where decisions are guided by human nature, not ideals, that makes all the difference. As Niccolo Machiavelli already observed, it's not just about what you do, it's about how you position yourself. Think about it. What if, starting today, you began to better filter what you say? What if you understood that not every question requires a complete answer? That not every curiosity needs to be satisfied? How would your posture change? How would people begin to perceive you? Because ultimately, respect doesn't come from exposure. It comes from control. Emotional control, narrative control, presence control. And that doesn't mean shutting yourself off. It means intelligently choosing what deserves to be said. That's constant adaptability in action. Now, the most important point, are you going to continue operating on autopilot, or are you going to start acting consciously? Are you going to continue delivering everything without criteria, or are you going to learn to use silence as a tool? Comment below. I want to know which of these points you identified with most. And if this content opened your mind in any way, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because here, you don't learn what's comfortable, you learn what works.